Hello, welcome to another edition of Varsity360. I'm Columbian sports editor Micah Rice, joined this week by Will Denner, and we are here to talk some state championship football. But before we get into that, let's give thanks to First Pacific Financial, the supporters of the show. We are coming to you from the First Pacific Financial Studio in downtown Vancouver. Thanks to them for supporting us all season long. And Will, we have made it. So have Camas. So have Seton Catholic. You and Meg Wachnick will be heading up to Husky Stadium this weekend for the Class 4A and 1A state football championships. How are you feeling?
Pretty excited about it, especially after last season and the WIA moving it back to Husky Stadium. Curious to see how that atmosphere is up there for a state championship football event. I've told you guys I covered a UW Oregon football game up there back in the day as a student reporter. Excited to be back up there. It's a beautiful setting for football, and really excited to see how our teams stack up. All
right. Well, the theme of this episode is the final countdown, and we will be going down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 through 5 themes. First thing we're going to address is 5 things that stood out last weekend at the Mackenzie Stadium semifinal doubleheader, where Camas and Seton Catholic both punched their tickets to the state championship game. Then we're going to talk about 4 stars on both Camas and Seton Catholic that could really make a difference if either of those teams are to go ahead and capture that elusive state title. Up next are 3 things to know about the opponents that await Seton Catholic and Camas, those being Sumner and Royal. Number 2, 2 areas where Camas and Seton Catholic might have the advantage. And finally, number 1, an X factor that could determine the outcome of this weekend's games. But before we get to that, let's set the stage for what Camas and Seton Catholic can expect up there at Husky Stadium. Camas is the number 1 seed is going to face number 2 Sumner for the 4A title. Camas comes into that game undefeated. Sumner just 1 loss, that coming to the eventual Oregon 6A champion Westland Lions. Seton, or first of all, before we go into Seton, that game, Camas versus Sumner, is 7 p.m. on Saturday. But getting us kicked off, 3 p.m. Friday, Seton Catholic versus Royal for the 1A state title, both teams undefeated. I guess you'll be new to the Washington State championship football games, as will all the players on both Camas and Seton Catholic. And that's because Camas has been to the state championship game 3 times, most recently in 2019, where they beat Bothell to capture their 2nd state title in program history. So nobody on this year's roster has any experience playing in the state championship game. Seton Catholic, this is their first time in the big dance. They made it as far as the state semifinals last year, but for everybody on that roster, this will be the first time, with all the marbles on the table, trying to get that elusive state title. And I think what they can expect is an atmosphere unlike they've ever faced in high school football. It's going to be in an 80,000 seat stadium. It's going to be knowing 1 game, 1 drive, 1 turnover, 1 big play might be the difference. What do you think you're going to be looking for in that setting up there at Husky Stadium?
Yeah, I think it's always kind of an adjustment when you get to a venue of that size. I mean, like you said, it's nothing like these kids have seen really in a normal high school football stadium. I think before the game and kind of looking around at just the grand atmosphere of it, and obviously there will be a lot of fans there, but there will be some empty spots as well. I think before the game there will probably be some kind of big eye looks around the stadium, kind of getting adjusted. But I think as soon as that ball kicks off, I would expect it to be kind of just another football game, and that's what these guys are going to be shooting for. So yeah,
I think it was really interesting how when you were talking to the Seton Catholic kids and asking them about the rematch with Royal, obviously they clashed in the semifinals last year. Seton has really taken this nameless, faceless opponent, just
right.
Another opponent. We'll get into how Royal is just not another opponent, but it definitely makes sense to to approach it from that perspective.
Yeah, I think it's always something that you're aiming for, and obviously they're good at kind of saying that publicly. I'm sure privately, facing a team like Royal, that they're going to have their hands full, obviously, but I think they have done a good job of trying to have that 1-0 mentality every week, that nameless, faceless opponent, as many cliches as you want to use. But yeah, I think, again, as soon as kind of the game starts, they're going to be focused in on the opponent, the task at hand, and everything else in the background. The atmosphere will kind of fade away.
Yep. Let's get into the final countdown. 5 things that stood out from the semifinal doubleheader Saturday at Mackenzie Stadium. The number one thing that stood out for me, Camas's clutch fourth quarter comeback. They were down 20-7 entering the second half. In fact, about midway through the third quarter, it didn't look very good for Camas because Gonzaga Prep, with its physical defense, was really keeping that explosive Camas offense under wraps. And then the fourth quarter happened. Big plays started coming out from left and right. Chase McGee with a couple of big touchdown receptions. Anthony Forner gets loose and breaks one. And next thing you know, the Camas Papermakers are fully in control, going on to win 28-20, dominating the fourth quarter. I was just so impressed by the poise that Camas showed to not deviate from the game plan when things didn't look like they were going their way for 3.5 quarters.
Yeah, and I think what impressed me was just how many of those seniors who have kind of been part of this run, kind of dealing with the past of a couple, early exits, and so many guys just coming through and performing in those big moments, and really just flipping momentum in that second half their way.
I think it speaks to the senior leadership on that Camas team.
Absolutely.
Like you said, a bunch of guys that had fallen short of maybe their expectations in previous years, but had the poise, had the maturity, and had the know-how to make the plays when they needed to happen in the fourth quarter Saturday.
Right, yeah, and it was a clutch performance, like you said, and against a team in Gonzaga Prep that was really rolling, and as soon as that midway through the third quarter started, it really started to flip for them.
You were paying special attention to the Seton game.
Yep.
What stood out to you most about Seton's victory over Montesano?
A few things. I think it was one of the best games I've ever seen Jacob Williams play, and I think the Seton Catholic coaches and players felt that way, as well as both a running back scoring 2 touchdowns. He had 2 interceptions, including a really big pick six, jumping a slant route in the third quarter after Montesano had gotten within 1 score. That kind of flipped things back to Seton, and just really the defense as a whole under defensive coordinator Mark Greenleaf. It was really a game I felt like that, while Seton's offense was kind of finding its footing, especially early, a couple drives that came up empty, and it was really Seton's defense that did a good job of getting negative plays and the tackles for loss, and then forcing 3 turnovers in the game. Really kind of allowed their offense the time to get rolling, and obviously that helped them tremendously in an ultimate 35-14 victory. All
right, so the first thing that stood out being Camas's poise down the stretch. The second thing being how Seton's defense was really key to their win. Third thing that stood out to me, just how important Titan Brody's touchdown was late in the first half of that Camas win over Gonzaga Prep. It was not looking very good. 13-0 20 to nothing at that point. Nothing going right for the Papermakers in the first half. And then Titan Brody, as the clock is ticking down, it's inside the final 20 seconds. He catches the ball inside the 10, makes a man miss, gets to the end zone so that Camas doesn't either have to use its last timeout or clock the ball. That really gave Camas something good to feel going into the locker room, and really set the stage for the adjustments that were made in the second half that eventually determined the outcome of the game.
Yeah, it was funny. I actually walked in right before that play happened and saw it from up top, and just a really beautiful move on his part to kind of sidestep a couple defenders and get into the end zone. And really, Brody we'll talk about him a little bit more later too, but just really his rushing attack helped Camas tremendously, I think, in the second half as well.
All right, give us number 4 about things that stood out to you at Mackenzie Stadium.
Yeah, not actually with either Camas or Seton Catholic, but I was impressed at how well both opposing fan bases traveled. I think both Monty and Gonzaga Prep, nearly filled that visitors grandstand, and Monty in particular, I think might have had more fans, which is impressive for a 1A school, and obviously all the fans coming over from Spokane as well. I mean, that's a long trip, and I think it really contributed to a good atmosphere at McKenzie Stadium.
Well, yeah, Tim Martinez wrote about it in his column this week, just how it ended up being a pretty much perfect day if you love high school football and just wanted sort of a festive atmosphere and a showcase for some of the best football around the state. McKenzie Stadium really came through as a great semifinal venue.
Absolutely.
So the fifth thing that stood out to me was just kind of Seton Catholic's ability to finish strong, and the way that 1A teams tend to be, sometimes a little small on the size of their roster. Sometimes they field a roster of maybe 40 kids. That's not the case with Seton Catholic. They have depth at every position group, and the way that they were able to finish strong and really out physical a very physical Montesano team in the fourth quarter to turn a game that was 21-14 at one point into a 35-14 win going away. I think that bodes really well for a Seton Catholic team who's about to face as physical as a team as you'll find in the 1A ranks.
Yeah, that's a really good point too, because I think we kind of know Seton as this flashy, speedy team, but they got kind of down and dirty and really kind of out-muscled the Montesano team, who it kind of loves to do that as well. They showed it the previous week when they defeated Le Center, but really a good kind of test for Seton and kind of showing that they can win in a variety of ways with their team.
All right. Well, let's go on to our next point. 4 stars on both Camas and Seton that could make the difference if either of those teams are going to come out with a state title. Let's start with Camas, and of course it all starts with quarterback Jake Davidson. Jake Davidson, again, another stellar game, finding receivers, when he needed to, especially in that fourth quarter, breaking big plays, also keeping a defense honest with his legs. Jake Davidson's on the way to having arguably the best single season of any quarterback in Camas program history. It would be certainly a fitting crowning achievement for him to walk off that Husky Stadium field with a state title, a la Jake Blair in 2019, a la Jack Coletto in when Camas won its first title. But I got to think that quarterback position is going to be key no matter what, and I'll be really interested to see how Jake Davidson rises to the moment.
Yeah, I think not only among the best in Camas program history, but I think he's on the way to being in the conversation for State Player of the Year potentially with how this weekend shakes out. And what a step he's taken from junior to senior year, and obviously head coach Adam Matheson has played a part in that as well. But really excellent, and man, he just showed so much poise in that semifinal game when that comeback started for them. So yeah.
Another guy I'm going to be looking at is Luke Webb, of course. That defensive end coming off the edge. When he gets home, he just can wreak havoc on an offensive game plan, speed up that quarterback's clock. He's been sort of in the mix these last 2 weeks that I've seen Camas play when their defense has been humming. He's been getting around that edge. And of course, it's going to be interesting to see what Sumner does to try to counteract that, whether they go with more sort of a quick passing attack or if they look to double team him or have a backer pick him up and maybe do something like that. What have you seen, from him maybe that you saw during the second half against Gonzaga Prep?
Yeah, I mean, just season long. I mean, I think, even when he's not getting sacks, he's constantly hurrying quarterbacks and chasing them down. I mean, it seems like it's almost like he's trying to chase people down, obviously, but he I don't know, he has such an ability almost to win at the line of scrimmage, but then also use his speed off of that, and just he's been awesome and one of several guys on that front seven that's been really good.
The third player I'm looking for on the Camas side is a guy that I think has really been the unsung hero of Camas's run through the playoffs, and that's Anthony Forner. Defensive back and receiver. He had a touchdown and an interception in Camas's quarterfinal win over Arlington. He had a big play touchdown in the fourth quarter and a key pass breakup that pretty much cemented the game late. Anthony Forner doing it on both sides of the ball, and again, he and his twin brother Jared, who Meg profiled earlier this week, are really bringing that senior leadership to Camas.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, and fourth, Chase McGee has been the go-to receiver for Camas in the playoffs. It looked like against Gonzaga Prep, every time that Camas needed a big play, Jake Davidson was looking for Chase McGee, and it kind of has been following a trend throughout this season that Chase McGee started off really hot, and then leading all area receivers through the first half of the season in touchdowns, I believe, and then as the season has kind of come down to the final biggest games here, once again, Chase McGee has come up big for the Papermakers.
Yeah, I think, as the season went on, teams kind of started to adjust a little bit, and, they recognized his speed and would kind of do different things kind of to defend him. But even, a team like Gonzaga Prep couldn't keep him out of the end zone. I think it was that touchdown catch against them that really was one of the highlight moments of that second half, and definitely one of the speediest guys in our area, and one of Jake Davidson's favorite targets.
Well, he showed his vertical ability in that first touchdown catch that really sort of set the tone for the second half when he went up and kind of out-jumped a Gonzaga Prep defender in the back of the end zone, showing that state champion pole vault ability.
Yeah, got that Randy Moss thing going and catching him coming down with it. So yeah.
All right. Well, let's look at 4 stars on Seton that could make the difference. And you talked about him. Let's start about this two-way threat, both at running back and all over that defense with Jacob Williams, what he's able to do to kind of influence the game.
Yeah, I mean, he's been on a tear this playoff run. I mean, even, when we talked about that game being the game of his life, I mean, the week before against Life Christian, he was kind of their closer in the fourth quarter with 2 clutch touchdown runs, but just a really savvy runner and that rare special ability of speed, shiftiness, but also the power to run over and kind of the vision. I mean, he's the total package, and I feel like he is really kind of the biggest key to what Seton does. So.
Another big key, as he has been all year, has been Joe Kalarami, of course, the Army commit, not only from his safety position in the defensive backfield, but also being that guy that you can kind of plug everywhere on the offense. We've seen him line up as receiver. We've seen him line up in the backfield. We've seen him in wildcat formation, taking direct snaps. Joe Kalarami, again, having an impact against Montesano. What did you see from him in the semifinals?
Yeah, I mean, as we always say, just kind of that Swiss Army knife who can do it all. I feel like even when he's not scoring touchdowns, like he is kind of the big play guy who kind of sets them up and kind of moves the chains when they need it most. Took some direct snaps again, can line up in the slot, can line up out wide, and just Joe Kalarami doing Joe Kalarami things.
All right. Well, and another key, of course, we talk about how key the quarterback position is, and that's especially true for Seton Catholic and the junior Colton Gesser. He has done nothing to disappoint at all through the season or at all through the playoffs. Yeah. Colton Gesser, obviously, what stood out for me was just the dime he laid in the second half that kind of blunted Montesano's comeback and led to a touchdown. He's been able to spread it around to his receivers like Teddy Wiesoric or Riker Ruelas or Xavier Crank, getting a lot of people involved. Having that field general back there has been key all season for Seton Catholic.
Yeah, I mean, he says it's his job to get it to the playmakers and let them do it, and he's been terrific at just kind of spreading the ball around and kind of taking what the defense gives him, and it's led to a great year for him and Seton Catholic.
All right, and finally, We talked about kind of the big three for Seton Catholic, but I'm going to leave it to you, Will. Who's kind of a fourth either player or position group that you think could be key on Friday for the Cougars?
If we're opening it up to position group, I'm going to say the Seton Catholic linebackers. I felt like there were a few guys. We talked about Jacob Williams, Xavier Crank, Roman Tabile, I think his name is, Evan Napoleon. Against Montesano, it felt like that position group was really key to kind of getting the push up front against Montesano, getting those tackles for loss, and just kind of limiting the big plays. I think Montesano only had, I want to say, 1 or 2 plays of over 20 yards. It felt like that linebacking core, a pretty deep group at that, was really key, and they could potentially be key again in this state championship game.
All right, let's go on to the third point. 3 things to know about Sumner and Royal. First, with Sumner, number 1, they are battle tested. 12-1 on the year, but survived an absolute war in the state semifinals against Chiawana, 37-31 in triple overtime, a game where they had to come back, I think, from 2 touchdowns down early. Chiawana kind of got the jump on them, but Sumner showing that grit just in similar ways to Camas, being able to finish strong. Number 2 about Sumner, they are physical. Sumner, I think, showed against in the quarterfinals against Skyview, just kind of when they are on, they can be really dangerous. That, of course, ended up 41-0 in favor of the Spartans. And it'll be interesting to see that matchup for me, because I thought Gonzaga Prep last weekend was the most physical team that Camas had played. And frankly, for the better part of 3 quarters, Gonzaga Prep really set the tone with its physicality until Camas was able to flip the switch late. It'll be very interesting to see what adjustments Camas makes to counteract another physical team in Sumner. And number 3, and we're going to get onto this later, but they are very well coached. Of course, Keith Ross runs he's one of the deans in coaching across the state, and just Sumner's record of consistency year in, year out, making the playoffs, having players at all position groups, and really not a team that shoots themselves in the foot, I think will make for a very scintillating 4A state championship matchup.
And you touched on it a little earlier too, but just their ability to hang with a really good team in 6A state champion in Oregon West Lynn, their only loss of the season. I think that really just kind of goes to show like what this team's ceiling is, and it'll be really interesting to see. We play this game a lot of kind of looking at the head-to-head scores and stuff, but I think a result like that really kind of opens your eyes into what this Sumner team can be.
All right, now three things to know about a team that arguably pound for pound, classification for classification, has been more dominant than anybody across the state in the last decade, and that is Royal. Go ahead and introduce us to Royal and tell us just how dominant they've been in the past decade.
So won 7 of the last 8 state championships. Pretty impressive in a rare group to win 4 in a row. That included last year when they beat Seton Catholic in the semifinals, and then ultimately beat Lakeside of 9 Mile Falls in the state championship. But really, it's short and sweet here. Number 1, their dual threat QB, Lance Allred. He's a beast. He's been one of the best in the state. He's the son of Coach Wiley Allred. Been really, really important for them. Their line has been exceptional. That really kind of was a key point that Seton learned about themselves last year, and just kind of how they had to get better in the trenches against a team like that that's just so disciplined. Obviously kind of it's a joke, an ongoing kind of thing of how these guys out in Royal City are working on farms all summer and kind of country strong and stuff, but I think it's true. And then finally, the defense. They're only allowing 6.7 points per game this season. They've had 4 shutouts. The margin of victory has been off the charts. haven't really played a close game yet, and a big part of that is their defense.
All right, Seton knows what it has in awaiting them on Friday at Husky Stadium, but they know firsthand and have grown from that. So I'm eager to see kind of what adjustments Seton makes to where now they know sort of the behemoth that they're going against, and can those Cougars play the David to the Goliath that is Royal. All right, let's go to number two areas where Camas and Seton might have the advantage. And since we just talked about Seton going against those big country strong Royal players, what on Seton's side do you think works to the Cougars' advantage?
Yeah, I think it's got to be their speed. It's just this kind of incredible depth of skill players across the board, and we kind of mentioned some of those names already, and really a team that can run with the best of them and scheme plays for kind of these quick hitting, get guys out in space type throws. And I think it's like I said, we've kind of seen them be able to spread the ball all around, but they know who their guys are. They know kind of when to push the right buttons to get the right people involved. And I just think their speed is still one of the best, and they can, if the situation requires, they can get into a track meet.
All right. Well, Camas has shown it's able to get into track meet and keep pace like they did with Arlington in the quarterfinals. They've shown they can get into physical knockdown, drag out, junkyard brawl like they did against Gonzaga Prep. And at the center of both of those approaches has been, of course, quarterback Jake Davidson. And that's one area that I think really tilts toward Camas's advantage, because you have a senior, because you have a guy that has been shown to be able to extend the defense down the field, hit those deep shots, and as well as hit those underneath shots, whether it's to a tight end like Nico Spear, or whether it's to do something that kind of keeps the linebackers honest, and also a quarterback that has shown time and time again to be able to use his legs, an emergent part of his game that, of course, we talked with Adam Matheson after the quarterfinals about how that was really meant as something that would take not only Jake, but Camas's offense as a whole up to that next level that it needs to be to contend for a state title. And here the Papermakers are.
Yeah, he's really thrived in that role as a dual threat guy. And again, just a really poised performance in the semifinals that has gotten them to this point now.
All right. And finally, we'll end the show with the one X factor that we think could decide the game in both the 1A and the 4A matchups. Let's start with the 1A. Will, what are you looking at as the X factor in Seton versus Royal?
Yeah, kind of repeating what we just talked about with the line play. With Seton Catholic, I was talking to offensive line coach Tucker Wilson a couple weeks ago for a story, and they kind of felt like after that game, they felt like they kind of had to hold up their end of the bargain a little bit more. They have, like we said, this amazing depth of skill players, but it's really their line who started 4 sophomores last year, a little bit inexperienced. Now those guys are juniors and seniors, and they have a 6-guy rotation, a real kind of, everybody kind of knows what their role is. They've been blessed with a lot of size and strength that's only getting bigger. And I feel like for Seton Catholic to have success in this game, it's going to have to start with that line play against a Royal team that excels in that area. So we'll see just kind of how big of a difference from one year to the next that Seton offensive line has grown. All
right. And the X factor, and you can talk to it as well, but for Camas versus Sumner, we go back to the coaching. Keith Ross versus Adam Matheson, both decades of experience, both perennial playoff coaches, both great staffs around them. This is going to be a real chess match, and I'm excited for it because, especially for Camas, in the last 2 weeks, you've seen a lot of great coaching adjustments mid-game, including against Arlington in the quarterfinals, slowing the tempo and making it so in the second half when Camas was trying to hold off Arlington that they really changed their approach and settled into a more ball possession type of strategy that made each possession more valuable and sort of blunted Arlington's ability to sort of hit deep and make it into the track meet that would have favored a comeback. And then, of course, last week, going from a scheme that really favored Gonzaga Prep in the first half to by the time the fourth quarter came around, Camas was in control of all facets of the game.
Right. Yeah. The adjustments have been key. And I really think with Camas, it's just been time and again this year, identifying an opponent spot on the field and just kind of knowing how to attack it. This is an experienced coaching staff, not only with Matheson, but a lot of assistants who have been in the game for a long time, assistant coaches who have been former head coaches. In Matheson's case, he was an assistant at the college level, much like Keith Ross was before coming back to the high school game. And one of these head coaches will be walking out of here with the first state championship for their team this year.
All right, we will see if Camas and Seton Catholic can end their seasons in the best way possible, being crowned state champions of Washington high school football. You will be up there all weekend along with Meg Wachnick. 3 p.m. Friday, Seton Catholic versus Royal. 7 p.m. Saturday, Camas versus Sumner. Be sure to follow along for all the coverage all weekend long and afterwards at 360 Preps. Follow us on social media, 360 Preps on YouTube, Instagram, X, and also Columbian.com. And if you're headed up to Seattle and Husky Stadium, we will see you at the field.